Hello and welcome to the round so far for 2025. I'm Xander McGuire and I'm joined by All-Australian goal kicker and multimedia expert, analyst, superstar Kate McCarthy, together alongside award-winning journalist Josh Gabelich and of course Riley Beveridge, a great friend of the show. We'll be bringing you the round so far every Saturday night with all the latest breaking news, highlights and everything you need to know about what's happening in the game. Today, well, a one-off. We're looking to share our pre-season thoughts, predictions after what's been a very busy few months in the world of football. Kate, can you believe it's under 2 weeks until the season starts?
I know, 10 days out. It's always a scary time to be an AFL expert, trying to make some predictions that might come to fruition, but we've looked into 18 teams and we've picked out a few that we're going to focus on for this preview episode, but so excited for the footy season to start.
Let's jump straight into that. Now, you've been fascinated by what's happening down at the kennel this pre-season. It's a do-or-die season, more or less. The weight of the world on their shoulders, and it hasn't been the pre-season that they would have hoped for.
Nah, the injuries. I think the injuries are the big story coming out of the kennel. Players that they can ill afford to have injured and out for big chunks of time. Waitman, Treloar, coming off that All-Australian year last year, was pivotal to their midfield. And then another player that's pivotal to their backline, Liam Jones, the combination that he was able to form with Rory Lobb when he went back there was incredible, and they looked like they had their defensive structure set up. But the other one, obviously, Johannesson hasn't played since round 9 last year, and then Jamari Ugelhagen with the personal issues off field that are going on that he's working through, still yet to sort of see a timeline around his return, and obviously just going to really affect all lines of the ground. That's midfielders, it's forwards, it's key forwards, it's small forwards and key defenders as well. I just really think that's going to put them on the back foot come early parts of the season where they want to get their season off to a flyer with Luke Beveridge in a contract year as well.
Absolutely. Now, this Western Bulldogs list has come under so much scrutiny given how much talent they have on paper. When you consider that, but then also consider what they've had to go through this pre-season, what do you see as a pass mark for this team?
Well, I think made finals last year. They have to make finals again this year to be in and around that same area as they were. So I think fans would be looking for that. But for me, yeah, pass mark, need to play finals, need to probably go that extra week as well to be in contention for, I guess, renewing that contract for Luke Beveridge, which there's been so much talk around for the last 2 or 3 seasons.
On my end, well, I've been absolutely absorbed by what's been happening at the Sydney Swans. Of course, that 81-point drubbing in the grand final, that's impossible to forget, particularly for Sydney Swans fans at the top of that list. But it's more what's happened in response to that, which I've found fascinating. You see one of the all-time great coaches of the modern era, John Longmire, step down and hand over in another one of these succession plans to Dean Cox. And it hasn't just been a routine handover. Dean Cox has been leaving no prisoners this off-season. We saw those consecutive 2K time trials. We've heard about a 7-hour review of that grand final, making sure that absolutely nothing will go unaccounted for. Allegedly, an hour spent on the first minute of that game. So really delving into exactly what happened mentally in that game. In 2025, we're going to see Captain Callum Mills return to the field. What that does to the midfield balance of that trio, Heaney, Gould and Warner, is yet to be seen. But it's nothing but a positive to have one of those leaders back on the field. Really, the question is, what is the mental toll? What do you think, Kate McCarthy?
I think they'll bounce back. I really do. I think there were signs later in the season from last year that they needed to fix up little parts of their game when things weren't going their way. And I think the 2 years prior to that, we saw a similar outcome grand final day. I've lost 2 grand finals. The first one, we didn't really watch again. We didn't go into any detail. We didn't pick it apart. It was just kind of like, we're back. We know that can fuel us for next year. We did the same thing in the grand final following year. We reviewed it absolutely went over it with a fine-tooth comb. And I think potentially that's what's happened here. They've realised that there's things that they need to take out of it. They know they were nowhere near their best on that day. They were the best team in the competition from sort of round 1 to 24 last year and just couldn't put it together on the biggest stage of all. But I think they come back. The repeat 2Ks, I would never do that. I would just simply quit. That would be my retirement. I'm not doing a second 2K. It's hard enough to do one, but Coxie's come in and he's really just, I think, upholding a whole lot of standards at that club. Not to say that John Longmire didn't, but it's a new wave.
Errol Goulden, of course, the superstar of those 2K time trials, finishing 3rd in the first one and 1st in the second one. Unreal stuff from him. Let's have a look at the match simulation games. We've had our first look at all 18 teams in the competition so far. Kate, what stood out to you so far?
Yeah, I really like the Ds. I like what I've seen from them. I know, obviously, off-field, a whole lot of trouble for them last year, but the emergence of Harvey Langford. So pick 6 from Melbourne, been showing some really good signs, and that's what these match simulations give players like Harvey Langford the opportunity to do, to spend some really good time, spending time through the midfield and rack up some of those minutes. And his left foot is just class. His ability to deliver inside forward 50, have a look, just rolls so beautifully. I love watching left footers that can kick exact way that Harvey Langford can. And the other one that I'm super excited about is Cozzy Pickett. We're not just seeing him get up into the midfield and run from there. We're seeing him push all the way inside D50. That occasion doesn't get used, but this isn't the same clip. It's another one, and we could have showed 3 or 4 more that are very similar. Just the run and carry. Also, his teammates are clearly aware that he's going to be doing this. They're looking for him to give the ball back to, and then the poise to deliver that as well. I'm so excited to see if he's going to work all the way D50 to forward 50. He's not only going to score a whole lot of goals, but he's going to set up a lot for Melbourne's forward line.
D's fans will be hoping that they can keep Cozzy in the red and blue in the coming years, the rest of his contract as well. To scope a little bit further in on outside of just teams at large, pre-season star, who's been the one player that you've looked at and thought, wow, he's set the track alight?
Yeah, well, there was the three-way match sim that happened up on the Gold Coast, and Levi Ashcroft, he only played 2 quarters of it, but he caught my eye. I love what he's able to do. I think there's going to be obviously comparisons made to his brother, and he stood up like he was basically Will out there that had come off a Norm Smith medal. He was just able to win the footy, and his footy IQ here, just being able to see last minute that Cam Rayner's free, a lot of people are going to come at me and say it was a fluke. I genuinely think he meant to do that. His eyes went that way. He saw Cam Rayner and threw a boot at it to just get it out there. And Gold Coast Suns didn't take a backward step. There was a few little hits like that on him off the ball, and he got back up, he regrouped, and he went back at them. And I was really impressed by his performance.
How difficult do you think that would have been for a young player and his first taste of match simulation at AFL level with bigger bodies to take hits, to be a little bit targeted? What sort of strength do you need to get through that?
Yeah, I think if he's just anyone coming in and that's his first game, I think he's got the reliance and the confidence now to see through what his brother has done. So they've grown up, obviously, playing footy together a lot of their life, and he's seen what Will's been able to do at the next level. I feel like for him, that gives him a lot of confidence to know, all right, he went up, we're playing a similar level, I can slot in, and I'm confident running around at AFL level, and he looked confident. He looked nothing but confident.
Well, for me, I'm putting all my chips in on the man that they're saying is one of the most high-octane players and people to ever walk through Kidney Park. He's got the headband, he's got the long flowing blonde hair, he's got the most social media followers in the game, he's an absolute superstar, Bailey Smith. And I think there's 2 elements to this for me. There's Bailey Smith, the player. This is a 24-year-old guy who essentially was just traded for pick 17 in a 4-way trade. But this Surf Coast lifestyle has completely rejuvenated him. He's spent most of pre-season that I've been there training under Patrick Dangerfield's wing, and you couldn't ask for a better role model in that sense. But I also love what he's going to do for the Geelong style of game. Of course, he's the sort of guy that on his day when he's playing purely in the midfield can amass 40-plus disposals, he can hit the scoreboard, he kicks goals, but his run and carry is exceptional. Let's look at what Geelong has really done over the last few years, Kate. They've transitioned from a side that's been really heavily inside football into now, in 2024, being the fastest moving team in the game with the ball, and by some length too. And not only is that statistically correct, you only have to look at the Cardew Greaves medal where Max Holmes won that by the length of the Flemington Straight, and he's one of the best line-breaking, running midfielders in the game. And in Bailey Smith, you effectively get a clone in that sense in what he can do for that team. So I'm big on what Bailey Smith can both bring as a player in his own right, but what he can bring to that Geelong system as well.
Yeah, I think his change of pace as well. I mean, we know what Max Holmes has been able to do. His ability to win his own footy, though, Bailey Smith, and change pace, that's something different that the Geelong midfield was sort of lacking a little bit. And I think him being able to inject that is going to be really helpful for them to break lines.
Now, everyone says that they're flying in February, but now that we've touched on a number of clubs and a few players, what do you think heading into the 2025 season, and who do you think will be contending in September?
Yeah, well, I've done a little bit of a premiership window here, so I think Brisbane, you'd be a little bit of a fool to write them off or to say that they're not in the premiership window. Carlton, I really like how they're tracking. Obviously, a few little question marks around some of their big men in Curnow with his pre-season being a little bit interrupted, but I really am sort of seeing them having a big 2025. Collingwood as well, we'll touch on them in a little bit more detail, but they're obviously putting all chips in, so who am I to sort of say that they're not taking the right approach to that? I think their ability to bounce back, we sort of saw it from Geelong the year after they won the flag, dropped out of the 8. I think Collingwood then follow a similar trajectory and head back inside the top 8. Fremantle, I mean, for me, it's sort of top 4. They have to finish in that area to be able to put a pass mark on their season. Yep. They've got the list now. They've recruited. They've got sort of the window. They're in their space. Can they do it? Can they live up to the pressure and the expectation that we're all putting on them? Geelong, I see them doing some really similar things. Obviously, last year, ahead in a prelim at three-quarter time, just didn't quite make it. Lost to the eventual premiers. Hawthorn, we all know what Hawthorn are probably going to deliver. They've only sort of bought more stocks in their defensive area, and we all know top 4 defensive teams win premierships. So that's that. And then Sydney, we've spoken about them. I think they're well and truly in their premiership window. You'd be a bit of a fool to say they're not, I think.
Now, one glaring omission for me there. Yeah. You've got a side that's played in 7 of the last 9 final series, have been rejuvenated under a new coach. You don't have the GWS Giants in your premiership window.
I have them sliding in, Xander. There's 3 teams usually that slide out. There's 3 teams that slide in. And so there's got to be 3 of them. And I've gone for Port Adelaide, GWS and the Western Bulldogs for the reasons that we sort of spoke about earlier with the Bulldogs. I just think that the injury toll is sort of going to take a big sort of part to play. I think GWS, the reason I sort of don't have them in, they were ahead in every part of the game except for 11 minutes in their 2 finals. I just think that stings. That really stings. Their ability to defend is my question mark. We all know how good the Orange Tsunami is as attacking, but they leak a lot of points by trying to go really fast and then getting beaten back the other way. So I think that's an area that they really, really need to tidy up. They need to get the balance right between attack and defence. And last year, clearly when teams got runs on them, like we saw in both finals, Sydney and Brisbane, they find it really hard to stop the teams coming back the other way.
I'm interested in your analysis of the mental toll of those defeats. You've got Sydney in your premiership window. Do you think that those agonising finals defeats take more of a toll on a young side than what an absolute drubbing does?
I think they do. I think the losses and the method of which they lost the 2 games, they were ahead at three-quarter time in both, and then they leaked a whole lot of points in the 4th term to lose 2 finals. You look back and you were a minute away from beating the ultimate premiers, and you were a 5-minute period away from beating the other grand finalists that ultimately didn't really turn up on the day. So I think they take its toll. Yes, losses like that can drive you. They can also sort of take the other way and think, have we got what it takes when we've been defeated in 2 finals like this on our list to win, ultimately to win the grand final?
Let's have a look at some individuals now. Who do you have, Kate, as your early Brownlow rising star? Who do you like as an individual heading into the season?
So I've got Charlie Curnow. Obviously no prizes for having him at the top. I think most people would have him as their favourite. I'm a little bit worried, though, around his durability. I know he's had a lot of off-season surgeries, multiple sort of lower limb issues. The knee still flaring up, had a clean out recently on that. So if not him, I think Riley Thilthorpe is going to have a huge season as well as a little bit of a roughie. Brownlow, Caleb Sarong, purely because everyone else has said Nick Dacos. I still think Nick Dacos will be towards the top come Brownlow night, but just someone a little bit different. I think Caleb Sarong finished 4th last year with votes that would have won him pretty much any other Brownlow medal. So rising star Levi Ashcroft, we've spoken about him at the top. And Dan Houston, I think, has the potential to be the recruit of the year in the sense that if Collingwood are going to take their game where they need it to be, I think Dan Houston's going to play a huge part in that. I see him getting all the way forward, kicking a few goals as well, just having real control over any line of the ground that he wants to play in. I think he's a big key pillar to them. What about yourself, though, Xander? What have you got?
Hard to disagree with a lot of that. I probably have Jeremy Cameron as my Coleman medal winner this year. I think with the Cats adding that extra run on the ball with Bailey Smith, but also continuing to be the fastest ball mover in the competition. If you can get Jeremy Cameron one-on-one, he's going to beat pretty much anyone in the competition. And the fact that there's no Tom Hawkins there makes him effectively the sole key forward target in that side for this year. Brownlow, well, I've got Nick Dacos. Yeah, 38 votes last year, and I think the Pies are going to win a couple more games than they did last season. If you account for what was an early season slump in form for him, I think that he could have pulled together one of the great seasons in AFL history. Rising star, hard to go past Levi Ashcroft. I'd love to say to keep a little watch on, of course, Sam Lawler, who, despite that fractured jaw, looked exceptional in his first game. Kicked 2 goals. I think he had 10 touches just in the first half alone. And it's a real low-risk season for the Tigers. The expectations are low. And as the number 1 pick, obviously, fans are going to want to see a lot from him, but they can afford to experiment with him a little bit.
We'd be remiss to also not mention Jager Smith. Obviously, the disappointment for his sort of season ending in the rounds that just gone with the preseason matches, and that's super disappointing from a young star that had so much expectation around him. So sending lots of love out to him.
Particularly, I was there on the weekend watching that game, and when Jagger Smith got his first disposal, Icon Park, the Carlton faithful, absolutely erupted. So it's terrible news, but we've seen Will Ashcroft come back from early ACL. Christian Petrarca did one in his first pre-season as well. So all thoughts go out to Jagger Smith, and hopefully he's back and better than ever in 2026. As for my recruit of the year, I'm going to go with Tom Barrass. And it's hard to split between him and Josh Battle, but I think that the flexibility that they give the Hawks, particularly early in the season when there's no Mitch Lewis, no Cal Shadir, they can allow to use James Sicily a little bit forward. They can shuffle the magnets around a little bit. And that's going to be really important if I think Hawthorn are going to be the team that we all think they can be in 2025, and that's a top 4 side. They've got to get some wins early on in the season, and that allows them to do exactly that. Now, one of the highlights of the year so far, and probably by the end of the year we'll be saying the same thing, the Indigenous All Stars game in Perth, Kate.
Yeah, it was a fantastic spectacle. I love everything that happened in the lead up to it. I loved what we saw during, and then I loved what we saw after as well. And I think this shows just how much the game of Australian football means to Indigenous Australians and how much of a cultural sort of significance this game has. I mean, ultimately, it was an Indigenous Australians game to start with, and to be able to see scenes like this over in Perth, I think Perth did it fantastically, and just watching stuff like this come out on social media after, just fan engagement with the players and how much this means. And I guarantee this meant just as much to Liam Ryan as it did to the fan that we're seeing on screen. And I think it's really important at the start of the year, during the year and after the year's over that we reflect on the moments like that that really matter to Australian football. What happens on the field, yes, it's fantastic. It provides us entertainment, but sport and ultimately Australian football is a game for everyone, and what it offers to the general public is just more than we can even put into words, I think. And
like you said, just the buy-in from the Indigenous players into that made it the product that it was. Do you think that maybe a state of origin in the future could have a similar level of buy-in across the competition? Where do you see that in terms of that debate that's been roaring on around the potential exhibition games?
Yeah, I think with exhibition games you have the risk of sort of having two teams that aren't super invested in what they're doing. And I mean that with no disrespect to All Stars games and things like that, but you have that question around, okay, when do you play it? Because ultimately if injuries come out of it, that's a real impact on the club teams as well. I think I love the Indigenous All Stars for it sort of being something that's so important to so many people for what we just saw then. I think every 2 years could be the window that it fits in, and I think potentially alternating between playing West Coast and Fremantle every second year, because I think Perth did it fantastically and I think it should stay there.
Well, the Indigenous All Stars were electric. They were unbelievable. They were an entertainment product like we haven't seen for a very long time. Freo, on the other hand, not so much, but maybe that was part of the plan.
We played a pretty vanilla brand. It's interesting because all the other teams get the vision and be able to watch it from behind the goal. So we tried to keep it pretty vanilla, and we'll work on bits and pieces next week when we've got match sim and the vision's not released.
Vanilla on purpose.
Yeah, well, I think I understand what he was trying to say there. But I'm not sure he delivered it the way that he wanted to. I think the term vanilla, I think that we would probably put that down as our pre-season clanger. A little bit of mince of his words. But yeah, it would be interesting to see, do they roll out the same tactics then in the community series? Because there's going to be behind the goal visions of that. So that'll be interesting. I don't think really having other teams having your footage is that much of a disadvantage, considering come round one, everyone will have everyone else's vision as well. So, yeah, a little bit confusing, that statement.
Well, that's one of the burning questions. We'll have to see what happens with the Dockers when they line up in the next pre-season match. But let's have a look at some of the other burning questions that have risen over the pre-season. We'll kick off with the Gold Coast. Obviously, when Damien Hardwick went up there, the weight of the world, the expectation was right on them. Do they play finals this year?
I think they do. I think ultimately if they learn how to win away from home, win 2 more games away from home and create the fortress that they did still at the Gold Coast and on the road in Darwin, obviously taking the games there, very hard to beat. So I think they definitely play finals this year.
I think we saw just how passionate Damien Hardwick was about that last year when he said in that press conference that they need to grow the F up. And I think another pre-season under him will help iron out those demons. Collingwood, the all-in-list policy, where do you stand on it?
Yeah, I think they've obviously gone the approach that it's all or nothing, really. If we have a look at their age at the moment, they're well above any of the other teams. So their average age on their list is 26 years old, and this is as of round 0 this year. And the average games, 102 games average
incredible.
between all the players. Obviously, Steele Sidebottom and Scott Pendlebury sort of lift that average a little bit with the average games, but you can see they've gone all in. And if you just have a look at where Richmond's sitting at the moment, they've sort of on the other side of this all-in policy. They've got the age of a 23, just over 23, and the average game's 52 on their list per player. So they've got 3 premierships to show for it, though. You feel like if Collingwood fans walk away with 3 premierships over 4 or 5 years, they're probably pretty happy with that.
Collingwood have been discussing the Geelong model when they've been crafting this list management model in terms of topping up with players that are more experienced, neglecting the draft a little bit, but I guess Geelong were able to replenish with younger players through the process.
Yeah, so I think that's probably the next step for them. They need to look at getting some youth back into the team, but clearly this year, getting Dan Houston across, they're looking to go all in and win a flag this year again.
Which South Australian team has the better season for all of our Adelaide-based watchers out there? Port,
well,
Adelaide.
I mean, I don't really trust either of these teams just yet. We saw the best of Adelaide 2 years ago and then not great signs last year, and Port were sort of thereabouts again. They were great all season, had little peaks and troughs here and there, but ultimately finished top 4, weren't able to make it all the way through to a grand final again. So I think you can't really say that Adelaide are going to have a better season than Port, but I'm iffy on both, really. What about yourself, Xander?
I like the Crows this season, a little bit more than I have in the seasons gone by. I think Peatling is a great addition. Neil Bullen has shown how much of a leader he's been on the track already, and all the rages about Sid Draper over there as well. I think that they can play finals this year. They probably have to. Yeah. As for Port, well, there's been a lot of noise around them and the Ken Hinkley succession plan. Where do you stand on it? Do you think it was the right move? Did you appreciate how it played out in public? Do you think that Ken should stay on for another year?
Yeah, I think it's the right move ultimately because it sort of keeps everyone at bay, because for so long now, for probably the last 2 or 3 years, at round 2 to 10, that's all the talk that's about the club. Okay, what's happening to Ken? Will Ken still be there at the end of the year? Will Ken still be there next week? It's happened so many times, and I feel like this is a bit of a contingency plan to just say, right, he's got the year, that's what's happening. Don't ask us any questions about it because we've made the decision. I also think it sort of dangles the carrot too for the Port players, and we've said so many times that they're so passionate about Ken, they love playing for him. I feel like they've almost sort of said to the playing group, you know what, if you love Ken so much, you've got 1 more year to put everything in to get that ultimate premiership success that you think you owe him. So all our cards are on the table, and that's what's happening for the next 12 months. So I kind of like it for that sense of it just puts everyone at bay and stops a lot of the questions.
It seems that a widely held view is that maybe some players and officials within the club will see this as a season that's already been wrapped up before it started, as one that isn't serious, if they don't see that Ken is the man for them moving forward. As a former player, do you think that that would be a sentiment that is in the club at the moment?
No, I completely disagree with that. I think they've said that this is what's happening and that, yes, Ken is the coach for this year. I think it's a real... Succession plans, when they're done well, they work well. And we've seen some work. We've seen some absolutely not work as well. So I think if they have what they need in place, it's actually a really nice period to sort of hand over to a new coach to make sure that when they step sort of in the door as the head coach in sort of 12 months' time or less than 12 months, that they know what they're doing. They know what's expected of the playing group, and the playing group know what's expected from them as well. I think it sort of helps shore up a lot of that too.
What's a pass mark for the Roos?
I think sort of last year, if we have a look at their last few seasons, 3 wins, 2 wins. Their best season in the last 5 has been 4 wins, and that was 2021. So I think, for me, I think they'll win 2 more games this year without doubt. I think anywhere up from 5 would be a pass mark for their fans. They obviously want to see the growth a little bit quicker than that, but I like how they're building. I really think another pre-season under Clarko as well. That first pre-season was clearly very interrupted with a lot of the stuff that was happening off the field too. Yep. So I think another sort of 12 months under him. I love what they've done getting Caleb Daniel across. I think we're going to see the best of him this year. And also Luke Parker, I think he's going to offer a lot, but they're youngsters that are coming through. We saw last year how close they were to sort of really taking games away from opposition. And I think this year they do it for longer.
My bar's probably a little bit higher for the Roos. I want to see 7 or 8 wins from them this season. I think you mentioned those veterans that have come in. I think Jack Darling's massive as well in terms of freeing up Nick Larkey a little bit. But if you look at clubs in recent times that have been in a similar position to North Melbourne, namely Hawthorn under Sam Mitchell and Brisbane under Chris Fagan. I think Fags in his third season came about second on the ladder, and I think Mitchell was seventh, obviously, last year in his third year. We're entering the third year under Clarko now, and admittedly the situation has been a bit different. You might argue that he had less to work with on the list when he first took over, and obviously that first year he wasn't there for most of the season. But I probably think they need to show a little bit more than just 5-6 kind of wins. They need to show that they're going to be pushing for finals in the coming few years.
Yep.
And the next round of practice matches coming up. What are you most excited to see after the first round in terms of what lies ahead next week?
Well, to be honest, I love sort of getting the opportunity to see so many different players roll out for their first hit out of the year. We saw a lot held back in those match sims, so we'll get to see full lists on display, and obviously Brisbane and Adelaide. I think Adelaide, we probably find out a little bit more about them, and Brisbane rolling out a lot of their youngsters. Gold Coast and Sydney will be another good one, but sort of the one that I'm really looking forward to is Freo and Melbourne. We've seen some really good things from Melbourne in that match sim. A lot of players to come back and roll through. How long will we see Christian Petrarca? How many minutes will he play? It'll give us a good window into that, and it'll also give us a window into Fremantle and how they want to move the ball, how they want to play. Are we seeing similar things to last year, or are they going a little bit more attacking with the weapons that they now have at their disposal?
I'm looking forward to that Dogs v Hawthorn game. I'd love to see. We've spoken about the injuries. We've spoken about how much they need to shift things early on in the season. And unless they intentionally play a vanilla brand of footy, I think we might learn a lot about those two sides in the coming week. Well, AFL.com is looking forward to being the one-stop shop for all things footy and news and views in 2025. And of course, Saturday you'll have us, Josh and Riley on the round so far through the season. Thank you very much to Amy. Thank you to everyone involved in the show. We hope you enjoyed our pre-season preview. And of course, Kate, good luck for what lies ahead for you, not just in the 2025 season, but a wedding as well.
Yes, well, when I come back on your screens, I'll be a married woman, so expect a lot of change in that time.
Fantastic. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.